My name is Ethan Rarick. I'm the director of the Robert T. Matsui Center for Politics and Public Service here at Berkeley. The Institute of Governmental Studies started the Matsui Center earlier this year as a way to honor the late Congressman Robert Matsui, but also as a way to attract Berkeley students to political issues, to political life, and as a way to give them practical exposure to politics and politicians and people involved in political life. And we decided that every year we would do a Matsui Forum, which would address one issue that was important to young people, to people who are students at Berkeley. And we decided to start with this topic, the involvement of young voters and young people in politics. I want to do a brief advertisement for one other thing that we do, which is that we do a lot of internship programs. And so for those of you who are students here at Cal, if you're interested in interning politically, we run a Sacramento summer internship program that sends kids to Sacramento to internship in the legislature and the governor's office elsewhere in Sacramento over the summer. We do a local government internship, and we provide scholarships to send people to the UC-DC program in Washington, D.C., where they can intern in Congress or the White House or elsewhere. So I would invite any of you to go to our website, which is politics.berkeley.edu, and take a look at those internship programs. They provide some great opportunities for people to get practical experience. Couple of quick logistical announcements. One is please turn off your cell phones so they don't go off in the middle of this. And the second is that we're going to make time at the end to do some Q&A, and I hope you guys have lots of questions. There will be a microphone that will come around when we get to that point. Just raise your hand. We are webcasting this. We are video recording it to webcast it, and so please wait until the microphone gets there so that people on the webcast can hear what your question is. As I mentioned, the topic tonight is the involvement of young people, your guys' generation, in politics. And we chose that in part because it's a very timely issue. Last year, we saw an upsurge in the registration and the turnout of young voters. We've actually seen that for the last couple of cycles before that as well. Last year, it was particularly dramatic. And so this seemed like a timely issue. And we have 5 people here tonight who are incredibly well qualified to talk about lots of different issues, the practical ways of getting people involved in politics, the new technologies that relate to political life now, the role of the media in politics. So it's a great panel. So let me quickly, one other thing, let me briefly thank our co-sponsors. We're co-sponsored tonight with 3 student groups here at Berkeley. And that's a great thing for us because we really want to get involved with student political groups and become active with them and partner with them in trying to bring political programming to campus. So our co-sponsors tonight, the Berkeley College Republicans, the Cal Berkeley Democrats, and the Undergraduate Political Science Association. Okay, let me start by introducing the panel, and then we'll just jump in. To my immediate left, or to my right from your perspective, is Meghan McCain. Meghan is a contributor to the Daily Beast. She graduated from Columbia in 2007, and then the following year created McCainblogette.com, a popular blog about the 2000 presidential campaign when, of course, as we all know, her father was one of the candidates and was the Republican nominee. She continues to post occasionally at McCain Blogette, but more recently has begun regular contributions to the Daily Beast, a site that I recommend to you all, where she has written about a wide variety of subjects, ranging from the campaign's effect on her love life to a piece describing Karl Rove as a Twitter creep. And most famously, she wrote a piece recently on the Daily Beast criticizing Ann Coulter, and of particular relevance for tonight's discussion, offering her own vision of where the Republican Party might go to attract people of her generation. To Meghan's right, as you look at the stage, is Michael Connery. Michael is the author of Youth to Power: How Today's Young Voters Are Building Tomorrow's Progressive Majority, a book about the role of the millennial generation in progressive politics. Michael is also one of the founders of FutureMajority.com, a blog about the involvement of young people in progressive politics. He's a board member of the Young Voter PAC an at-large member of the DNC Youth Council, the Democratic National Committee Youth Council, and sits on the advisory board of Headcount, a nonprofit that registers young voters at live music events. In 2003, he was the co-founder of a similar organization called Music for America and served as its communication director and web editor in 2003 and 2004. In 2008, he was a National New Media Fellow with the Center for Independent Media. He's a graduate of Boston College and Indiana University. Next on the panel is Randy Zuckerberg. Randy manages marketing initiatives at Facebook, where she has led the company's U.S. election and international politics strategy, as well as pioneered several large media partnerships. Those include projects like the ABC News Facebook presidential debates, the CNN Facebook Inauguration Day partnership, and a program on Comcast called Facebook Diaries. She's also the chief spokeswoman for Facebook, has made numerous appearances on programs such as Good Morning America and The Today Show. Most recently, Randy represented Facebook as a correspondent for CNN.com's Inauguration Day and State of the Union live broadcasts. She's a graduate of Harvard University, and she was included on the Hollywood Reporter's 2008 Digital Power List. Next on the panel is Nicole Lapin. Nicole is a news anchor for CNN.com Live, where she produces news reports, or anchors news reports, anchors Now in the News, a web-based news update, and she provides briefings on CNN US and headline news about the most popular stories on CNN.com. More relevant, though, for tonight's discussion is that she hosts a weekly interview series on CNN.com called Young People Who Rock, which is about people under 30 who are doing remarkable things in every aspect of life. Nicole has received many awards for her work in journalism, including citations from the Chicago Emmy Committee, the Hearst Journalism Foundation, and the Society of Professional Journalists. She's a graduate of Northwestern. And then on the far right, as you look at the stage, is Heather Smith, who is the executive director of Rock the Vote. Rock the Vote seeks to increase the political engagement of young people, as you know. Prior to Rock the Vote, Smith founded and directed Young Voter Strategies, a nonpartisan effort supported by the Pew Charitable Trust to re-energize democracy through developing tools, data, and information for political campaigns to run their own young voter programs. In 2006, Young Voter Strategies coordinated a national nonpartisan project with 15 organizations that collectively registered more than 500,000 young voters. Prior to launching Young Voter Strategies, Smith served as the national field director for the New Voters Project of the Public Interest Research Groups. That project registered nearly 600,000 new voters and conducted an intensive get-out-the-vote effort to bring those newly registered voters to the polls on Election Day. She's a graduate of Duke University. In 2006, she was named a Rising Star by Campaigns and Election magazine, and in 2007 was named one of Esquire magazine's best and brightest. So we've got a terrific panel. Let me start by maybe asking Heather to begin, and then I've told the panelists I just want them all to sort of jump in and interact with each other. But Heather, I mentioned that there has been this upsurge in young voter involvement. So give us some sense of historical perspective and numbers on that. How much has young voter involvement increased? When did this start? Give us the perspective.
Yeah, well, the conventional wisdom for decades, right, was that young people don't matter, that you're apathetic, you don't count, and you certainly don't vote. And that's what the media told you, and that's what candidates told you, and you were all but ignored by the political process. And you know, for good reason, young people were not turning out at the polls in very high numbers in the late 80s and through the 90s. But in about 2000, things started to change. People started paying attention a little bit more, following the news a little bit more, and a new generation of young people started entering the electorate. And by the 2004 elections, those young people came of age in the voting, in age in terms of voting, so they turned 18. And the 2004 election saw the largest increase in young voter participation between two presidential elections ever, since 18-year-olds won the right to vote in 1971. There was a huge increase between 2000 and 2004. That everyone blamed on, you know, the war in Iraq, a one-time thing, a blip in the radar, but it was actually a trend that was just beginning. In 2006, turnout went up between the midterm elections by the largest margin ever between two midterm elections for voters under 30. It was happening. Something was happening. Not only was turnout going up, but the share of votes cast, so the number of young people and their percentage in the voting population, was growing and growing. And in 2008, it was, the conventional wisdom was put to bed. And the fact that young people are turning out in increased numbers became part of the story because it was proven to be true. So for the third major election in a row in 2008, young people increased their participation at the polls. They increased the percentage of votes cast. It was the largest raw number, sheer number of 18 to 29-year-olds to ever cast a ballot in a single election. And the percentage or their share of votes cast went up again. So 2008 really was, for the third major election in a row, an increase in participation. And really the dawn of a new era of what the electorate looks like, what politics can be, how politics run, and the opportunity for our generation to really shape what our country looks like moving forward.
And I guess the obvious question then is why? So we've had this huge increase in voter turnout. Why now? Why such a big increase? And I get the first topic that I want to throw out for people to discuss is technology. We've had in the last few years a whole development of what are sometimes called Web 2.0 technologies, things like Facebook and Twitter and so forth, that seem very involved in politics. How important is technology in integrating this generation into politics? Randy, Facebook's at the center of doing that.
Sure. So for any of you who may be on Facebook, you're one of 200 million people in the world.
I think the better question is anybody not on Facebook? Probably.
You're one of 60 million people in the United States and one of 30 million who logged on today. So it's a very powerful tool for how people communicate, how they relay information. When you were talking, Heather, it reminded me of this amazing, my personal eureka moment of working on the election. We partnered with Rock the Vote around the Iowa caucus, and what we did, we put a message at the top of the Facebook homepage just to people aged 17 to 29 in Iowa. And we didn't tell them who to vote for. We didn't do any leading language. It was just language about how important it was to take part in the caucus. And participation was up 2,500% in the caucus. So that was just my own personal moment of seeing how powerful technology could be in connecting people. And I also think it's the personal recommendation from friends. People look to experts in the news. They also look to their friends. It is not cool to be uninformed, and it's not cool to not take part in elections. So if you see that 80 of your friends are voting or 50 of your friends became a fan of a political candidate, it's very compelling to find out.
Is that what these new technologies provide? Is the connectivity between people at a personal level? It allows you to connect quicker to more people. Heather, you're nodding your head.
Share information. I mean, Randy's story was one of my personal highlights from the campaign as well. We had all these numbers of people who were doing things on Facebook, and everyone said, well, that's great, but will they turn out? And we said, absolutely. They're following the news, they're getting informed, and they're having peer-to-peer conversations with each other about going to the polls. And I was with Sam Donaldson on air on caucus night in Iowa, and he was like the old guy and I was the young person, and and they were pitting us against each other, and they called the Democratic race for Obama while I was on air, and I got to say, working with Facebook and these new technologies, people were not only communicating, but they were convincing their peers to go to the polls. And you just saw young people show up in record number and actually impact the outcome of this election. And I really do believe it was both the learning, the information, and the peer-to-peer communication, and the process. Like, it's confusing, I think intentionally. And we're able to the political process, and we can break that down through online communication.
Is that, Megan, you were out on the campaign trail for 2 years. So you must have experienced where Facebook was used to...
I was actually just going to ask you, do you know what ratio of Democrats actually went out and voted and Democrats you registered? Because I'd be curious to hear. I mean, yes, Democrats have utilized this well, but Republicans have not. And I think when you hear things, I don't know if this is correct, didn't Facebook actually work on Obama's campaign? Or was that MySpace? I don't know, someone who invented it.
One of the Facebook founders left to work on Obama's campaign. We actually worked very equally with both campaigns. And I guess we offered up all the same services to both. And
Do you know percentage-wise what?
I don't, because the voter files don't track who you vote for. They only track if you vote. But I know that amongst registered 18 to 29-year-olds, 83.5% of them voted, which to me is amazing and really proves the point that there's a process barrier. It's the fact that once registered and in the system, hey, we turn out at 83, 84%. That's awesome. But it's that registration barrier. And my guess is young people are just new to the process. Party identification isn't that strong except for amongst a small portion of them. It's really about being new and not getting it. At least clearly we're nonpartisan, so Rock the Vote, that's always been our approach. I don't know.
But Megan, I would have thought out on the campaign trail you would have seen the use of these new technologies attract young people, including obviously on the Republican side, but you think that Republicans have been slow to use those, is that?
I do. I know you say Facebook and Rock the Vote were very active, maybe because I was actually literally on the bus and on the plane, but I had no interaction with Rock the Vote or Facebook whatsoever. I don't know if it's just because I was part of the campaign and embedded, or if it's you can't work directly with campaigns or whatever, but I did not have any contact at all with either organization.
What kind of, did you see the role of technology in involving young people in the campaign, or?
I did, yeah. I mean, definitely. I had a blog that chronicled life on the campaign. I just think, I think that it's interesting to look. I don't know the stats right off the top of my head, but I do think it's interesting to look at the sort of correlation between Democrats using Facebook. I think I wrote an article and I said my father had 500,000 followers on Facebook, and I think Obama had 5 million. So there is a disconnect going on, and whether it's the Republican Party's fault or I don't know whose fault it is. I think everybody's making lots of speculation. I think you can talk a little more about this.
I think you're hitting an important point here, is that the technology by itself doesn't that by itself isn't the end-all be-all of increasing young voter participation. In 2004, Friendster barely existed. Like, a few people used it, but not very many people used it for campaign purposes at all. But youth turnout still went up in 2004 by, like Heather said, the biggest turnout increase since 18-year-olds got the vote. And I think what's been going on is that more and more campaigns, or initially in 2004, outside organizations are actually on the trail, having face-to-face conversations and engaging young people in politics. And you can have technology and it's going to help. Facebook is a new public square to meet people, bring them into your campaign, get them to do more things offline. But you have to have those conversations. You have to bring them offline. And the campaign has to treat young people like a valid constituency. And I don't think that's been the case for a lot of campaigns. And I think that's sort of the problem, is that you were the lone voice on your father's campaign for this. And if there was more people on the Republican side talking about this, I'm not going to say that the way the electorate divides up would be equal, but maybe the gap wouldn't have been quite so large.
I think it starts with messaging too, and I think you have to, there's a big joke that right now going on that Republicans don't respect the internet in the same way that Democrats do, and I still think it starts with messaging, and I think that it's not even necessarily that Republicans have Democrats have a better message. I just think it's packaged better, and they really understand the internet in a way that Republicans just don't seem to right now, or utilizing it in the right way.
To the credit of the Republican Party, I thought that the Republican Party did a fantastic job with Facebook starting about a month before the election. It was just kind of a little too late at that point, but it was really, they really adopted it very well. There were a lot of videos that were specific to Facebook, a lot of messaging, and so I wish, moving into the next election, that there would just be more of that.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting, when you have Gavin Newsom announcing his running for governor on Twitter, times are changing, so.
Is this less of an ideological divide and more of a generational divide? That is to say, in both parties, I would assume that people on campaigns who are older are less likely to embrace those technologies, and people who are younger. Now, the Obama campaign did this very well, including the older members of the Obama campaign. But for a lot of campaigns, the younger people are the ones who are pushing these technologies, right? Was it your idea to start a blog? What did older members of the campaign think about that? Did they?
No comment.
But that points to, it's not. I don't think it's so much an ideological divide, is it? It's generational. Is that fair, or do people think there is this ideological sense that Democrats just use these technologies better? I mean, Mike, you were saying that they're really an opportunity, but they're not the end all.
The technology is agnostic, like it should be. I think that there's a mindset, though, perhaps on the Republican side, that is a little prohibitive. I mean, if you look at conservative blogs, they don't allow comments. They're these one-man shows where it's just one person. It's very much an op-ed format, whereas on the left, you have giant community sites like Daily Kos and Mighty D, where it is this big public sphere of conversation. So I think the way people conceptualize these technologies is a little different ideologically. That said, I mean, the tools themselves aren't ideological.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And is I have a theory which I want to throw out, and then you all can tell me that it's crazy. And that is that the reason these technologies integrate people of this generation into politics is that they sort of mimic the rest of life, that they provide an immediacy, an individuality. You can go out and you can hook up with your particular friends. They empower the individual and they provide instant information. And that's what people of your generation, much more than people of my generation, are used to in all aspects of life. And these technologies do that in politics.
Technology, is agnostic, like you were saying, but it makes people, in theory, feel like they're being listened to. And what we were experimenting, we've all seen Rick Sanchez with his Twitter and Facebook obsession, and we love that. God bless him. But it's a new way that we're looking at the news right now and utilizing instantaneous comments and instantaneous questions as well, because I think Heather's right. It's clunky. It's a clunky process. And I was sitting, at a Starbucks with my big briefing book for the caucuses, and med students came up to me at UCLA and were like, "Can you tell me what a caucus is?" I was like, all right, sit down. We're going to learn together. And so I think utilizing some of that technology in the media is only going to increase moving forward, because no longer are viewers or readers writing into this amorphous, email box, and they don't know whether or not they're being heard. They're kind of being heard, and their comment is being read live as it's coming in.
I also think just the whole thing of sharing your views about politics in a public forum is a really new thing also. I mean, even, 8-10 years ago, you never would have put your views on gay marriage or issues like that up on a Facebook profile. You wouldn't have publicly declared causes that you're for. And now that's the norm. Now you see, you communicate with your friends and you see that, all of your friends are for certain issues, and it's very normal to just debate with them and post your feelings. And I think that's adding a lot to the immediacy in the conversation that's going on as well.
Is there a potential drawback there that people, I mean, you see what people tweet about, for instance, and it's not always the most thoughtful or important or substantive issue. So is there also a potential drawback that the conversation becomes kind of trivialized because people are constantly twittering away about I'm eating a blueberry muffin or something?
Right, but just because we were talking about this walking here, just because the technology is there doesn't mean everybody should use it, but potentially. But it is something that the news media is embracing, I think, in that we can't just reject the citizen journalists or the user-generated content anymore. And that was a big debate when we first launched iReport, for example. And do you take somebody's video of the campaign? Is it doctored? Is it in front of a green screen? What the heck is it? But I think once Virginia Tech happened, where we only had the first graphic depiction of the shooting there from a cell phone camera from a student, is when the game really changed for us. And then moving toward the election, the momentum just picked up even more. And I think we said, okay, you can't let citizen journalism run amok, but you kind of have to embrace it, and you have to use it as one of the things that you use in your normal news gathering operation. I don't think anybody has the answers yet. It hasn't been ironed out, because there are a lot of blueberry muffin fanatics who make it on the air or whatnot. But you're right, it's no longer taboo anymore.
That's interesting. So I recently watched, I guess YouTube held a town hall with President Obama, and that he answered, I think there were hundreds of questions submitted, and he answered 5 or 6. And for every category, it was about like the legalization of marijuana surfaced as the leading issue, right? So clearly there's some very vocal majorities on the web that and that's why I actually think, people ask all the time, like, are newspapers dead, expert, journalism? I actually think that expert opinion is more needed now than ever because there is so much that's out there on the web. And that's why you see like CNN Breaking News is the #1 account on Twitter, on Facebook, New York. Yeah. Sorry. But there's such a need now for expert news, I think, to sort through all of that.
Well, and also the power of the peer-to-peer network, right, is that you do want a trusted messenger. And so we've done a lot of work with whether it be integrating our registration technology into Xbox consoles or jukeboxes online to generate millions of voter registrations. But it's in that turnout capacity when you want to know where do I go and what do I bring and who do I vote for and who do I trust and what issues do I, where do I fall on this stuff? You ask your friends, you ask your family. And so while MySpace was not a very effective tool in that capacity because it was a whole bunch of perfect strangers, I believe, Facebook really was because you were having conversations with your friends and with trusted messenger. And that peer-to-peer impact we saw from our Facebook program put turnout as much as 20 points higher in the states that we ran that versus other states that we did not.
Let's turn a little bit away from technology for a moment, although we can come back to that, and let's talk about what, for lack of a better term, I'll call the Obama factor. How much of the upswing in young voter turnout is due just to Obama's popularity? On the one hand, Heather, you said it went up a lot in 2008, but this had started previously, right? Long before Barack Obama was running for president.
Yeah, it did not go up in between 2004 and 2008 the way it did between 2000 and 2004. I mean, this is a trend that had started. This is a new generation of young people, I believe, have had enough. It's like things are bad enough. The economy is bad enough. We're the most uninsured age group in this country. There's over 14 million of us without health care. We're the ones fighting the war in Iraq. There's over 1,049,000 17 to 29-year-olds who fought in Iraq or Afghanistan. The future suddenly does not look quite as good as it used to. We've grown up with things like 9/11 where our country's been attacked, and we have a different worldview than our older brothers and sisters of Gen X. And that's affected the role that we see government playing, and it's affected the role that we see ourselves playing in deciding our own future. And so my theory is that the combination of these new technologies to be more connected, and finally things just got bad enough that we had had enough. Young people started participating in the process. All of you started talking to your friends and families and saying, we need something new. We need a change, and organizing to make that happen. Now, there were candidates in the 2008 election who, in 2005, Rock the Vote awarded John McCain and Barack Obama as the candidate from each side of the aisle who in the 2004 elections paid the most attention to young people. It was kind of funny then to see that they both denied that they were going to run for president at that, but then like 4 years later. But not only was there this increased participation in following the news and volunteerism, it made us more susceptible to contact. And we had candidates, and in particular Barack Obama, who reached out and he talked to young people. He used the medium and the messaging and the forums, and he paid attention, and he showed up at our campuses and our community colleges, and he did the asking. He asked people to register, he asked people to get involved. And that combination, I believe, was a kind of perfect storm of all of these different factors. So without any one of them, no. But in combination, it made the 2008 elections a historic one.
But at root, you see it as less Obama-specific than sort of events over the last 8 years.
Yes, but I also think that you need leadership and you need politicians to pay attention to young people. It's like, were we cynical? Of course, we were ignored. And so when you start to have this engagement combined with candidates and politicians actually paying attention and talking about our issues and what we believe in and what we care about, that combination, in my opinion, is what created a surge at the polls in the 2008 elections.
And Mike, do you agree? I mean, how much do you place as a result of Obama's personal popularity versus events of the last few years? These are things you write about and think about a lot.
I mean, I'm on exactly the same page as Heather. I think it's a combination of events over the last few years and the role that young people saw the government should play and wasn't playing in our lives. And I think it really is, it's about reaching out and talking to young people. Obama had those conversations, but even when it wasn't Obama on the ballot in 2006, we had young people turn out in record numbers. We had John Kerry, the most uninspiring candidate you can imagine. And I mean, and as Heather said, the difference between 2000 and 2004 is much bigger than the difference between 2004 and now. So, I mean, Obama, he was the right candidate, and I think that definitely helps. But, we could have nominated anyone else in the Democratic field. I think we still would have seen a huge youth turnout, and probably still more than 2004.
Meghan, what do Republicans need to do to kind of begin to appeal to see a similar kind of boost that the Democrats had over the last few years?
I just want to ask you, Heather, a really quick question. When you were saying from 2000 to 2008, people were getting sick and jaded, I mean, obviously you're implying the Bush administration, correct?
Well, no, I'm just, over the past decade, I just feel like for all Americans, there's this sense that, and in particular young people, they always tend to be about 1 year ahead in the polls in terms of what the top issue is. So we have 2.5 million members. We hear from them all the time. But then we also do national polling with bipartisan pollsters. So, Ed Goaz and the Terrence Group does our Republican polling, and Celinda Lake does our Democratic polling. And we try to understand and sample young people to go, what are the top issues? Because we want to be a microphone on those issues for them. And, in 2005 and 2006, the economy was by far the top issue. And that was above the war. And that was well before the overall population caught up. And we'd ask why, and they'd say, well, because I'm carrying, on average, $22,000 worth of debt if I go to school, and only, a small, decreasing numbers of us can even go to college. And I don't know, once I get kicked off my parents' health care plan, I don't have health care, and I'm not getting offered it with my entry-level job anymore. And for the first time, we saw young people say that they don't think that they're going to do better than their parents. So this is a national kind of state of mind, and it just starts to feel like, you can blame the war in Iraq, you can blame the Bush administration, you can blame 9/11, you can blame the lack of funding for civic education and in our high schools, which I actually think contributes as well. It's like there are all these factors, but people are feeling like they've simply had enough, and the future's not looking so good. What do you do about that? It is so depressing. You opt out or you opt in. And I think in the past couple elections, we've seen candidates and organizations reach out and say, opt in. I'll make it easier for you. I'm going to simplify the process. We see technologies allow people to talk to each other and go, yeah, it is bad, but here's what I'm doing, and here's what I care about, and here's what we're going to do in the future, and here's what's going on. And you see volunteerism increase. I think it's a way for people desperate to do something to improve their lives. Like, we all do stuff out of selfish means, right? They want to make their lives better in the lives of those that they care about. And I think they took that concern to the ballot box in the past couple cycles, and with any luck, that will continue.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's no secret the Republican Party is in big trouble right now. We've got a branding problem, we have technology problems. I mean, I get asked a lot, why are you still a Republican? Because I still believe in the core ideals, but I think there have been a lot of radical people that have hijacked it. But I think when it comes to technology, I mean, I remember, because I was in headquarters and I was on the road, I mean, it was a big joke that one of the guys from Facebook was helping their e-campaign, I mean, we're like, well, they got Facebook, so we're, what the hell are we gonna do? You know what I mean? So I think there's a lot of things going on, but I mean, I'm no disrespect to either of you, but it was seen on our campaign that even though people say they're bipartisan, oh, well, but Obama's, like you said, he reached out, he did all this, and I think there's both, it's a catch-22. Was it the candidate or was it the technology? And I think, the Republican Party just it will have to start using the internet in a more efficient way, or it's gonna die. It's just that simple. I mean, the average Fox viewer, I think, is 62, the average AM radio listener is 67. I mean, people are just gonna start dying, and then that's gonna be it. So, and you have to start, you just have to. And I think to ignore it, I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, that's the big question right now. But I also know that after Kerry lost and Bush won again, the Democrats were having the same identity crisis, and there was no Obama. So I do have hope that in 4 years there can be this, candidate that can come and, do what Obama did. But
a huge opportunity, because even if you look at the numbers on Facebook, over 40% of people identify themselves as conservative. So it's clearly,
But what age range?
well, I mean, there's 60 million people in America, so.
Because
and
81% of people under 30 consider themselves a Democrat.
Yeah.
I know that stat.
So, and actually, as we've added more people in the US, it's started to skew more evenly with the public. So I think that, obviously something happened, right? That Obama had 3 million people on his fan page. McCain had 600,000 on election day. I don't know if it was the candidate, I don't know if it was the technology or the youth, but the good news, I think, is that there's a huge opportunity because people are listing themselves and identifying themselves, and it's definitely not a lost cause.
Yeah.
It's also a need, right? Just based on sheer numbers for the Republican parties, it's not out of the question, right? In 2000, the youth vote split 50-50. In 2004, it was a very small margin for Kerry, like 10 points. It broke open in the 08 elections, but it's like this generation, we're the baby boom kids. We were a fifth of the electorate this cycle. This generation will be nearly a third of the electorate by 2012. If any candidate wants to win office, they have to appeal to the youth vote. My ideal world would be no party ID. I want both parties fighting over us. I want them to tell us, how will you make college affordable for me? How will you make sure I have health care? How will you make sure that, when my brother or sister or cousin goes to war, they come back and have, are taken care of. And so I want both parties to be fighting over this generation, and I think there's a political imperative for them to do so just based on sheer number. And I think for survival of the party, and I congratulate and applaud you for pushing forward within your party, because I know it's an uphill battle. Rick Davis is on our advisory board. I've been pounding into his head for 3 years, going, you gotta trust. If you ask them to vote, they will. And sooner or later it'll be a matter of survival,
and
I think that time is now.
In 2012 it will increase voter registration with, definitely.
I do. I mean,
You mean voter registration among Republican young people?
No, just among
among young people
in
overall.
general, I do, yeah. It's a habit. We've learned as organizers that when someone gets involved, they tend to stay involved. Voting is a habit, and partisanship is also a habit. And so I think that's another fear for the Republican Party, is that if young people start to vote as Democrats over time, they'll stay Democrats for life. It's much easier to persuade someone younger before that partisanship is really embedded. Participation is the same way. Get them young and we'll keep voting. Unless someone really screws us over in the next couple of years. But
I mean, I think, it was always so fascinating because I have a very good friend that lives in LA, and he had a McCain bumper sticker on his car, and someone threw a brick through his window. And that's how uncool it is to be a McCain supporter in LA during the election. You get your car, brick thrown in it. And I think Democrats have just won the branding issue across the board. I mean, there are documentaries being made right now about people on election day, why do you support Obama? And they couldn't name one reason. I mean, my favorite person was he said because he's got Palin with him, thinking that Palin was Obama's running mate. So I think you have to obviously observe the fact that there is a branding issue going on as well. You go into Urban Outfitters, there's still Obama t-shirts, whatever. We have lost the branding war in every possible way. And I think, that's the interesting part about being in politics right now too, is that now you have to brand yourself, in a totally different way than I think there was even 4 years ago.
I think it's more substance too.
Yeah, I mean, you've lost the branding war, but I think you've lost the issue war to some extent too. I mean, you even argue, this is something that you argue. I mean, if you look at issues
no, don't get me wrong, but I think also you can't, I definitely agree, I mean, trust me, I agree with you, but I think that, obviously there is this element to it. It's very hip and sexy to be an Obama supporter in the last election, which is, God knows I tried, but I don't know how you fight something like that. But, and not that issues aren't as important, and was a very big deal as well, but there was that element of it as well. So.
But what do you think the hip and sexy future of the Republican Party is? I mean, I will look and see the debates going on live almost every day. Who is it? Is it Michael Steele? Is it Sarah Palin, who's the face of the new GOP?
I think everyone should calm down with this because it's 100 days into this administration. It's okay that we don't have this candidate right now. It's okay. And I think just as Obama emerged from nowhere, that is what I believe will happen. I don't think it's really anyone that's on the stage right now. And I think that I think the problem right now is that Republicans are Tea Parties. Oh my God, Tea Parties, that's what's cool right now. Everybody have a Tea Party. And it's like, you just be patient. Let's heal, come back from this crisis and whatever's going on. And I think that's what should happen. And it just starts with messaging. And like you said, there are a lot of ideals. I'm a gay marriage, pro-life Republican, which just rocks everybody's world. How is that possible? And I think the Republican Party has just got to open up to the fact that times are changing.
And that's certainly not impossible to do, right? If you think about 20 years ago, and this was a different generation of young people, but young people voted overwhelmingly for Ronald Reagan, a candidate who was very conservative. And yet, if you look at the numbers, you have a great chart on your website about the Democratic edge among young voters. Recently, it's very large, and you go back to the mid-'80s, and all of a sudden, it's a very negative number.
Yeah, Ronald Reagan, he did have a great image, but if you go and look at what the college Republicans and the Republican Party did in the 80s, they did exactly what Barack Obama did. They went and spoke to young people. They invested a lot of money in their youth, and that's something that, as they won the youth vote, they stopped doing, and gradually things became even, and now they've flipped again as Democrats have really put that effort into outreach.
And they made a conscious effort in the 80s to do that, and you can see the results when you look back at
the college Republicans grew from like 100 to like 1,000 chapters in the early 80s, and they helped the Republicans in the 1982 midterms, and then they came out in huge numbers for Ronald Reagan in '84.
There's some great clips on YouTube of Karl Rove as the head of the college Republicans at the time, and Frank Fahrenkopf at the RNC talking about, good news and bad news. Good news is we're really, really popular with all the young people. Bad news is I have no idea how to get them to vote. And then they're like in this basement of this church or an office, and they come up with the youth outreach strategy. So
yeah, it's a great clip of Karl Rove saying, it's like black and white way back in the day. And Karl Rove is saying you need young people doing peer-to-peer outreach to young people, which is what we've been saying for the last 6 years now.
Right. And which is now done largely through technology that didn't exist at the time, or at least
yes
a lot
and no.
of it.
That's what I was getting at before. A lot of it is happening through technology, but the Obama campaign put tons of effort into fieldwork with young people. They didn't drop any young people off of their walk list and the voter file. They actively used Facebook, college registries, and other tools to build the voter file to make it reliable so that they could reach out to young people with it. So it's not just technology, it is traditional fieldwork as well.
In your opinions as the experts, do you think that our campaign was bad at all this and we were terrible? And
I don't think you guys tried it until the very, very end, and it was too late.
I think your father is one of the more compelling people in person, and every time he did a town hall, whether it was with Rock the Vote or MTV or CNN, and he took questions, which he was really good at and was incredibly authentic, he could turn a room. And I saw him do it in New Hampshire in the 2000 race, and I saw him do it, in Iowa and some of these places where he did town halls with younger people. I just don't think the resources were spent reaching out to them, would be my.
I would agree also, because I know, we were desperate to have more interaction. Our goal was to have voters as informed as possible, and when you have a representative sample of the United States and everyone is talking about Obama, clearly there's not the right information is getting out, and the Obama campaign would come to us and we would say, if you come to us with this idea, we have to bring it to the McCain campaign also, even though it's your idea. Yeah. And we would do that, and we would bring it to the people. And that was why it was wonderful when the campaign started working on Facebook and on Twitter and YouTube towards the end of the election, and why I wish it had started earlier.
And I do wish, the people that ran the campaign were much older, and I think that if they didn't get it then, like I said, there's just no choice not to get it at this point. And I think the Republican Party really, it must evolve or it's gonna die. When I have friends that were Republicans in 2004, and then in this election for X, Y, and Z reasons just couldn't, and I think part of the problem, like you said, is the lack of using technology, and it's just fascinating that some people even now are, no, we don't need to, and I don't know if you need any more evidence than the last election.
It's a new way of doing politics, right? It's this, instead of trying to find the small sliver that's undecided and convert them, or that small sliver that hasn't voted in like 2 decades and convince them to go vote, it's saying, I'm going to put faith in the, traditionally low turnout, disenfranchised, young people of color who, on average, are not participating because they're not part of the political process right now. And I'm going to reach out and expand the electorate. And I'm going to talk to them, and I'm going to engage them. That is a whole new way of doing political campaigns and politics, I believe, and it's something that, massive grassroots campaigns and technology allow us to do, but it's a leap of faith for people who have been running campaigns the same way they've been running them for, 50 years. I think that it's inevitable, and with any luck, will force them to continue doing that as a generation of young people who engage the cycle, because we're not going away.
If you're just a nuts and bolts campaign manager guy, it's beneficial for you anyway, because it's way cheaper to get someone who's never voted before to come out and vote than to persuade someone who might have voted a different way that he needs to vote for your guy. So it just makes sense in your plan.
I wanted to ask, Randy, you mentioned that the Obama campaign was more involved with Facebook than the McCain campaign. Not involved in the sense that you were working for them, but involved in the sense that they would come to you with ideas and things like that. But it wasn't. I think this was not just a party issue. They did those things much more than the Clinton campaign did in the Democratic primary. Correct? Wasn't it that the people running the Obama campaign, for whatever reason, regardless of party, just kind of got it more?
Definitely. Plus, you had all these organizations like Move On and other organizations that weren't even related to Obama administration that were really active on Facebook and technology, so that compounded it. It made it seem like everyone who was on technology was for this. So I think you're absolutely right. I also think maybe you did have younger people who were working online. I mean, the Obama campaign was run like a technology company, which was really one of the first times I've seen anything like that. And they put a lot of resources into that, and they took a gamble there, and it was a gamble that paid off.
And how much? Let me ask a non-technology question. How much of this has to do with the fact that Barack Obama, relative to most presidential candidates, and not just John McCain, but relative to most, was young? That he was in his 40s. That Hillary Clinton was, 62 or something like that. That Bill Richardson was older. Does that make a difference? Is there?
Say my dad was older.
Well, that's true. He was. Is that just a? Is there a connection that exists between voters of today's young generation and candidates who are younger, or to people of your generation, does Barack Obama seem equally as old as everybody else, and it doesn't make any difference?
What I hear from the folks that I traveled the country for 13 months on the campaign in a bus with a bunch of artists and musicians and volunteers, and we talked to people all around the country, and my overwhelming sense is we're not stupid. We don't want to be treated that way. They could be young, they could be old.
It doesn't matter.
It's just pay attention to us. Talk about our issues in a way that matters, in a way that's relevant, using messages and medium that we're familiar with.
For a while, I think Ron Paul would have been elected if you had gone just by technology alone. So.
And then a lot of
He's
still popular.
Yeah.
But that's what's interesting about Ron Paul, too, is for a while during the primaries, everyone was unsure because he raised $5 million in a day, I think, and he had a big blimp over everything in New Hampshire, and everyone was unsure. Yeah, everyone was unsure. I remember pollsters that worked on our campaign, they were like, well, his people are unpollable, they don't answer, they were like comparing them to totally. They were like, these Ron Paul supporters, and people were fearful during the New Hampshire primaries, what if all these Ron Paul supporters come out? And that was the big thing on Election Day. Well, how are the Ron Paul supporters doing? Did they come out? And then they didn't. So that's the interesting thing too, because he raised a crazy amount of money online, and his supporters were everywhere. That guy's supporters were our hotels, outside our buses. I mean, the strongest and most entertaining supporters out there were Ron Paul's supporters. And even now, I wrote an article and I mentioned Ron Paul in it, and then my mailbox is flooded. Ron Paul revolution, Ron Paul's the man. And I was like, how is this still possible? Like, how does he still have this cult following him? And he's a fascinating man. It's fascinating, but that is also, why didn't that work? You know what I mean? Because he raised a crazy amount of money, and his supporters, I mean, you have no idea. His supporters, like, I ran into one of his supporters in the ladies' room one time that was going off about Ron Paul and all this stuff, and it's just, I mean, he had a cult following. I mean, much in the same way that Obama, I think, did. So it's interesting.
We ran a lot of polls on Facebook, and we actually had to start taking Ron Paul out of the polls because they would just jack the polls so much. And so finally, we started running this poll that was like, what's the biggest issue in this election? Like the economy, healthcare, the war, go Ron Paul was one of the answers. And I mean, just to like show what a joke it was, right? The cult
what was the result? Did Ron Paul finish first by any chance?
Of course, go Ron Paul is the biggest issue in the election.
But he came in 5th in the primary. Which it didn't correlate.
That's the interesting thing. I mean, he had I remember reading on a Burnt Orange Report, it's a Texas blog, that there was a huge Ron Paul rally out in the quad one day, and there was early voter registration right there on campus, and something like, he had like I don't know, a couple hundred or 1,000 people at the rally, and only 50-something people ended up voting for him on campus.
Yeah.
He was never able to take any online support and convert it to offline, and also, everyone keeps saying, oh, technology and young people. Ron Paul lost the youth vote by a lot in almost every single Republican primary.
Yeah.
I mean, your father beat him, Huckabee beat him, even Romney beat him in a lot of primaries.
Yeah.
By the way, let's talk a little bit about the role of the media in all this, and we talked a little bit about that earlier, but Nicole, why don't you start here? It seems to me that the traditional media have not always been that adaptive at adapting new technologies, and that there's been that a lot of old line media organizations, I think particularly of newspapers now, a lot of which are going broke, have very little connection with the younger generation. And obviously the media play a big role in political life. So how do media organizations begin to sort of connect with people of your generation? Is it through the web? Does it happen with traditional media organizations like CNN? Does it happen with new organizations like the Daily Beast, where Meghan writes? How does the media begin to connect to people of your generation?
You know, Meghan and I can both take this if you'd like, but if I knew, I might have a bigger salary. I think that, I started at CNN when I was 22, and it was a big push for me to try and get this series that you mentioned, Young People Who Rock, off the ground. And it was a series that I conceptualized before the campaign. It was when we were seeing, Paris coming out of the jail, and it was breaking news, and I said, my God, this is not me, this is not my generation, this is not my group of friends, and being at the most trusted name in news, we need to tell the other part of the story. And it was a really big battle for me against the network to say, no, youth matters, my generation matters, and maybe we're not in the demo, but we should be talking about these stories, and they are going to resonate. And they said, no. And I said, yes. And I said, I will do everything for this series. This on top of my anchoring duties of 4 hours a day and being a correspondent and whatever. I said, I will pick up the tapes. I will, book all of the people and get them to bureaus so it doesn't cost any money. And I will organize their volleyball schedules and their whatevers to get them there without booking help, without marketing help. And they said, all right, fine, give it a try. This was 2 years ago. And it haphazardly, with no marketing push, became the most popular blog, the second most popular blog after the Political Ticker on CNN.com, which is a small website. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. But so it was a really big honor, and it was something that just happened because not only did young people read it, but their parents read it. And then I got the attention of the suits and the advertisers and people who said, oh, wait, there is maybe something there. Because parents and grandparents wanted to see, okay, I'm leaving this world in good hands. It's not going to be Girls Gone Wild. It's not going to be, table dancing, going out without your undergarments on all the time. It's going to be something that I am going to be proud of, when I'm gone. Like you said, those viewers and AM listeners.
I think that one thing that I just actually had a conversation like yesterday about was, then why is MTV News doesn't exist anymore? When my father ran for president in 2000, I was 14, I can still remember MTV News having correspondents everywhere on his bus. This year, nothing. I never ran into MTV News once. I don't know if the network still exists, I don't know, but it's like, that's the 18 to 25, I think that's their demographic. Why then is it, whatever reality show on that network, and that's what we're feeding to young people, and that's really what I worry about right now, is that my little sister, watching MTV, she doesn't get any news, no 10 to the hour anymore, nothing. It's just the hills and whatever, and you're feeding this generation, dumbing them down in a weird way, I guess, or you're just expecting them only to be interested in, no insult to CNN at all, but MTV is for 18 to 25-year-olds specifically. So I don't know if MTV and Rock the Vote work together.
She was telling me before we came on at dinner that you polled young people about their news sources.
Yeah, about their news sources. So, MTV we were founded 20 years ago, or more or less, in 1990, and MTV was our media partner. And at the time, it was Madonna draped in a flag singing about, voting, kind of. And then, open the flag and there's nothing but her in a bikini. And MTV needed public service content, so they played the Madonna spot. And the recording industry wrote the checks and funded Rock the Vote as a nonprofit. And 20 years later, 18 years later, popular culture was much more than just Madonna, and the news and media was more than MTV. So while MTV still did some stuff, MTV News is much smaller. Sway is still out there, but he's on CNN doing interviews. So we partnered with Facebook, and we partnered with CNN, and we, Christina Aguilera redid the Madonna spot this year, but this time she had her newborn child draped in the flag as opposed to, unveiling herself in a bikini. Times have changed both in terms of, what people typically want to see, but also in terms of where they're getting their news. And we found that CNN was a much better source of news, and all young people said that was their #1 source of news for politics, as opposed to MTV. We can't control what the networks do, but we go to where they watch, and that's where they were.
It's also interesting to see how after CNN and YouTube announced that they were doing the YouTube debate, it was like this crazy free-for-all. Every media company was like, grab your favorite social network and do a debate with them. Yeah. And which was at least like the day after you announced that, my phone was just ringing off the hook. Like, can we do a debate with Facebook? But I think CNN has really pioneered a lot of new ground in terms of showing the relevance of technology companies and really trying to reach out to younger voters, and has been really great.
YouTube debates were crazy. It was like being at like a soccer game or something. There were people yelling inside. Yeah, totally. Yeah. It was a good one. I hope they do that in the next election series.
Yeah, I think that to your original question, it's exciting to be at a network that is rooted in a culture of breaking the rules, and I'm all for that. But I really think that there's a lot more to embrace still. Once you start reading your tweets on the air, there's something else to jump on and be on the forefront. So it just keeps going, as if the 24-hour news cycle wasn't fast enough.
Yeah, and I think what you're doing with the Daily Beast is really cool. It's a really cool site. For those of you who don't know, it's totally like the first basically online newspaper where people can kind of vote up and down content, dig style, and reporting on what's interesting. And I think, personally with the media, I think the best thing the Republican Party can do is keep putting you on air.
Thanks. But there are some people that would wholeheartedly disagree with you, but thank you.
But has the media been a little, it was interesting listening to all of you talk. Nicole, you talked about when you first proposed this show, there was a resistance to it. Megan and Heather, you both talked about MTV News having shrunk or gone away or whatever. So has the media been slower to latch on to the importance of appealing to this generation than, say, politicians? Politicians, it sounds to me, have have gotten it quicker or better or more thoroughly than a lot of media organizations.
I get shot down all the time. I fight the good fight. I try, but I hear a lot. That doesn't matter. Or, I pitch the money shows and say that I want to do something on, youth finance or, balancing a checkbook or silly things that at least they think they're silly. And so I feel the pressure a lot. I feel like it is a little bit slower, but recently there has been this kind of call to action, this uptick. And what's really fascinating about getting your media on Daily Beast or on CNN.com is that you can do both. You can kind of multitask and you don't have to just watch 10 to the hour and that be your source. You can open up another browser. You can, watch both at the same time, or you can get your, we were talking about this earlier today, you can get your news in the best way that story is told. So CNN.com, for example, has recently experimented with putting video as the top story. So if video best tells that story, we're going to use video, or if text does, or is it a still gallery, or is it an audio slideshow or something like that. So I think there's a lot more flexibility and at least trying to adapt to an audience that wants to get things on demand and at their own time and at their own leisure and as they want it. So I think that maybe it has been slow to come to fruition, but
then why is CNN coming in third? Because this is what I think is so interesting is that Fox and MSNBC are so, you know what you're getting when you turn on Fox and you're trying to get MSNBC, and CNN truly is, in my opinion, bipartisan, but it's ranked third, which is fascinating on average.
Well, I was talking specifically about the website, which is number one for news. And I think that that's kind of where you're seeing a lot of this multitasking that I was just mentioning, where you can
do you have an opinion
the
on the actual network, though?
I probably shouldn't. I might get myself in trouble and see it later.
Cable versus broadcasting a little too is that there's just the sheer numbers you can reach, but that just but one thing I thought was
that reaching out to that bigger demo that you were saying, instead of getting the slices, you know what you're going to get potentially if you watch certain networks. I would love to reach out to that bigger chunk more.
Well, and if you're having a hard time, that makes me a little nervous, because CNN is the network that did the Rock the Vote, candidate forums in the 2004 elections and really led the way on that. That Anderson Cooper hosted, and you guys did the iReport and the League of First-Time Voters, and we're really out there pushing the audience. And I think it's the same as with a political campaign, where as a young person, you want to see your peers running it. Like, how amazing to be in, I was in Atlanta, Georgia, and the state director for the Obama campaign was a 23-year-old person, and you go, okay, I see myself as part of this campaign. When you're watching the news, you see yourself as part of that news cycle, making the news, reporting on the news. That's when you feel like you're part of something and probably grow attachment to it. I think CNN is doing that more and more, and I think if you continue to push that, that would really change how news is delivered.
Definitely. I think
I'd be pretty psyched about
one of the biggest compliments that we have gotten is seeing how foreign media companies have reacted. So I know that, India's having an election this month, Germany is having an election in September, and traditionally they would never do debates like we've done, and now they're taking cues from CNN, from ABC, from everyone, and are repeating a lot of the things they've seen that are successful here. So I think that's one of the biggest tributes.
So before we should go to questions here pretty soon, but before we do that, let me ask a question about sort of how we build on the momentum of an upsurge in youth involvement in politics. And we've been talking mostly about voting, but I suppose we want people to be not only voting, but volunteering for candidates, getting involved in issues and so forth. And we want it, presumably as a society, we want it to include not just Democrats, but Republicans, independents, everybody. So how do we keep that going? And let me point back to a time when it didn't. In 1992, the first time Bill Clinton ran, there was an uptick in turnout among 18 to 29-year-olds, and then it went away. So how do we, Heather, do you want to talk a little bit about what needs to happen to keep people involved?
Yeah, I think there's responsibility falls amongst all of us. I think, our country and our world are in a bit of crisis right now. I do believe that. Time when the ice caps are melting, if you want to do something to affect, record rates to affect climate change, then figure out what to do and go and be a leader on that. We need young leaders on that at a time when, there's still people living in trailer parks in New Orleans. Figure out and be a leader and affect change around that issue at a time when, there's millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of Americans, at least tens of millions of young Americans without health care, and you want to affect that. Figure out what to do about that. So the onus is on all of us to figure out what are those issues that you care about, what would you do if you ran the world, and find ways to make an effect and be leaders on that, because we are the future leaders of this country. It also means run for office. It means register to vote and vote in the next elections. There's city, there's mayoral, and there's presidential, there's state elections coming up in 2010. So I think that we bear some responsibility. I think there's plenty that we can do, but I also think that government and candidates and the news media and all the political establishment, if you will, have to continue to be open and embrace input and allow us to be a part of that governing. And if they don't, I think that we have every right and absolutely should revolt and fight back, and I will help lead that, whatever that may look like, because I think the opportunity to do something right for the world and for our own lives is now, and I don't think we'll get another opportunity like this.
I worry sometimes when I see submissions for young people who rock from, the iReport submissions, that a lot of young people are doing the exact same thing, starting organizations for those issues, and they don't realize that there are other people doing the same thing. So I worry about this fragmentation, in that we were all kind of raised in this, college application mindset where, it asks what organization you were part of and what role you had. And sometimes it's actually not the role you had being president or founder, but it's being part of a bigger organization instead of starting your own. And so I worry sometimes that the power is lost and diluted in a lot of different organizations. So moving forward, I hope that that's something
Hopefully we'll connect with Facebook.
Reconciled.
They should all go on Facebook and find each other, yeah.
No, I mean, I think there's incredible power. I mean, I guess traditionally TV was able to reach the most people. Now you have sites like Google and Facebook who are the biggest distribution platforms in our country. And I think we definitely have a real responsibility to make sure that people have good information, that people get information early, that they have time, that they can connect with their friends, that they connect with the politicians. We're definitely an active seeking right now to have every politician in the Senate and the House on Facebook to make sure that people can connect with them. So, and to hopefully have a more open government where people can actually see bills, vote on them, weigh in, and I don't know, it'll be exciting.
I'll second the call for open government, but wearing my partisan hat, I'll say that what Obama did in terms of reaching out to young people is still the exception. It's not the rule, and we need to make sure that state parties, local candidates, Senate candidates, gubernatorial candidates, all do youth outreach and put as much of their resources to it as Obama did. I think the Republicans should be doing the same thing, although I prefer if the Democrats do it. One thing that we I'm a partisan.
But you mean it was the exception, not the rule, among Democrats?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, it's Obama. It's John Tester did it. Jim Webb did it. But these are just a few. Joe Courtney ran a great campaign, one of the closest campaigns, if not the closest campaign, in 2006. It paid off for all those candidates. That needs to be how every candidate approaches their race from now on. One thing that we didn't talk about at all here is that opportunities to participate in politics and in government are not evenly distributed in the population. They're mostly clumped towards higher income, higher educated people, and the people that aren't being included aren't on Facebook. They're on other social networks, if they're on social networks at all. So that's what we've got to do next, is really make sure that everything we've seen among college students is something that we see among all young people.
And how do we, let's talk about that for just a minute. How do we do that? Again, not just either side or party or some specific campaign, but I mean, how do we all kind of do that?
It's a question of resources, I think, for the most part. If you're involved in nonprofit work or electoral work, working in those communities is the work that is most hard to raise money for, and when funding dries up, it's the area that gets cut from funding the quickest. And otherwise it's the same thing. Different technologies might work better than Facebook. It might be mobile, SMS. The immigration rallies from, is it already 3 or 4 years ago now? Those were organized by local radio and SMS. So it's recognizing what technologies is going to work, and then getting more people on the ground to do the peer-to-peer organizing that we've talked about.
But then I'm curious about an end game, because during the election we saw a lot of young people mobilizing around Facebook and Twitter and the rest of it, but they were working toward something. It was clear that there was a goal. But now, when we're an off year, what's the goal? And is that a necessary component in all of this to move forward?
People are paying attention. You should not, kind of response I get just from the things I've been saying is insane. And I think people are paying attention. And I think for me, my partisan hat, there are a lot of frustrated Republicans out there, a lot of them, and a lot of young, frustrated Republicans. And I think we have to demand better. We have to demand better from everything. And I think in this situation specifically, to somehow say that we're not interested and not engaged, I agree with you that it's just going to continue on the upswing. We have no reason to believe it won't.
Okay, well, on that inspiring note, let's turn to some questions from the audience. We've got a microphone, and we're going to have somebody bring it around, and let's start with the gentleman right down here.
Hi, my name is Andy Kelly with the Cal Dems, and this question is just for the general panel. Earlier, there was a lot of statements about the partisanship of Facebook or Rock the Vote, and I know a lot of young people have heard that, and we feel that Facebook is just a tool, like a wrench or a hammer, and that a wrench doesn't tell you how to vote, and that it's just there. And do you think that it's more that young people overwhelmingly are supporting Democrats, or that the media technologies themselves were getting our generation to be more mobilized?
Randy, do you want to tell?
Sure. I think it's, I like to agree with your opinion, right? I really see Facebook as a tool. I think maybe the Democratic voices on Facebook were louder, or maybe the organizations were louder. They were trying things first so that it was new and there was more buzz in the media when they did try them. My goal, my personal goal in the entire election, I was just very forceful of our entire team to remain very nonpartisan. We were both the DNC and the RNC. Like, no one donated money. We went to equal fundraisers and equal events, and we wanted to be, so you can do, you can try as hard as you can to be a tool and a platform. I think at the end of the day, if some voices are louder than others, though, the perception can be, I don't know.
Isn't part of the answer also just that this was a good election for Democrats, and parties go up and down, and they have good elections and bad elections, and the whole country in this case was, this was a good election for Democrats, and presumably they were louder on Facebook as they were louder in the electorate.
Yeah.
And
But do you think,
it mirrors that.
Who worked on the Obama campaign? I'm sorry, I don't.
Sure. So we had 4 founders, and one of our founders, Chris Hughes, left Facebook to be a technology advisor to the Obama campaign. But we were very careful. We knew that going into that with Chris on that campaign, that there was already going to be a bias that we were in line with Obama. And so I think in some ways we actually tried to go in the opposite direction and try to be less formally aligned. So again, I think some of what you're saying is right. I think
do any Republicans work for Facebook?
We have a lot of Republicans who work for Facebook.
Just wondering.
Yeah, actually, our general counsel was a leading Republican, came to work for us, and we have quite a few Republican supporters. So it's just interesting to me when you see that 40% of people identify themselves as conservative, and then that voice is completely drowned out on the site. What's happening?
Soon enough, everybody's going to work for Facebook. So, let's come down here. Maybe this young lady over here, Jennifer.
Hi, my name's Elle, and I guess this is really directed towards Megan, Heather, and Nicole, and Randy too, I guess.
Yeah, let's just.
Sorry.
Let's just assume every question is for everybody, and you can just Ask him.
So I'm an avid user of Facebook. I follow Meghan on Twitter, and I also read CNN every single day. And during the election, I remember seeing status updates come up for both sides from friends. And I was just wondering what your opinion is of the possibility of an adverse effect from, when you cram a message into 140 characters. Does your message get lost to a degree? And does this create kind of a group effect within young people who may not necessarily be totally tuned in and just read perhaps a Twitter message or a Facebook status update rather than really research the issue?
Who wants to? I think that's a fair question and a good question.
I think that's the $64,000 question right now with everything. I think, Twitter gets made fun of a lot in a lot of different ways. I love Twittering. I mean, I'm alone on the road a lot, so it's a good way to tell people what I'm doing, and people seem to be interested. But I think there is this worry that, every second, I'll really be interested in the next presidential campaign, how they Twitter. Is it going to be, I'm at a rally in Iowa and I've got these supporters and I'm so awesome. I think, to a degree, it's the big question right now is how cool do we need our candidates to be? How cool? Obama was a rock star for so many different ways. And I think the Twitter question is, I think you can't tell right now. I think you have to, that's my opinion. I don't know, you guys.
Yeah, I think there was just a study out that showed we're now more desensitized because we're getting these really quick bits of information. We're not really processing it. So you just see 25 people killed in Iraq, and you're like, oh, whatever, it's just another Twitter. Meghan got a blueberry muffin, same thing. So you're kind of keeping it, you're keeping it on your feed, and you're giving it the same weight psychologically. I'm not, by any means qualified to pontificate on that, but it's something to follow looking forward.
On the bright side of that, though, I think people are engaging with more news and more content. So beforehand, maybe people wouldn't actively go to CNN, or maybe they wouldn't actively go to your blog. But because it's there in the stream of Twitter or Facebook, they're at least exposed to a lot more news content than they would have before. So I think it definitely has its pros and cons.
Yeah, I don't really buy the whole 140 character argument about Twitter, because if you use tiny URL or bit.ly, you can link to a giant term paper on any topic imaginable. And the whole idea is that you're friends with people on Twitter who you are friends with in the real world. And maybe you're not going to read every single thing that's out there coming from a campaign, but one of your friends is probably very political and is reading a lot of that stuff, and they're probably vetting it in some way, and they're going to retweet the stuff that's really valuable. And your friend, you trust your friend, and maybe then you click on that link. So I don't think it's quite so soundbite-ish as people make it out to be.
And it's also up to the person. It's up to the individual to dig or to not dig. It's just the same way, we were talking about with newspapers. It's up to you to flip to the next page or not. So, it depends on your habits in real life too, I'm sure.
Yeah, presumably we want people paying attention. If they look at Twitter, it's great as long as they then go to something else. We don't want them just reading tweets, right? We want them going to Facebook or Twitter or whatever and then pursuing that link to the giant paper on a serious subject or something.
I just have more faith in people. If it's a major decision that might affect their lives, they're probably not going to make it based on 140 characters. Yeah. But if it's they just want to be a part of something bigger that's happening, and that's what all their friends are doing, and that's who they trust for advice, then yeah. So I guess I say, great, but they're probably checking out all this stuff, and now they have trusted people to show them where to go if they want to make a bigger decision. Yeah. And I have more faith in people than that, I guess.
Right here in the front row. Jennifer, you're right there, and then we'll go back there a little ways.
I'm a little more skeptical about youth turnout and the outreach of the Obama campaign. Turnout among all groups went out, and of course Obama could reach out to youth. He had a gazillion dollars, he could reach out to everybody. And given the tradition that young people vote less than others, and given that usually candidates don't have so much money, how likely is it that candidates in the future will reach out to youth? Because the truth is, older people still do vote more, and if you have limited resources, you can't spend it on getting out the youth vote when you need to get it out to people who are more likely to actually turn out.
Mike?
Well, that's one of the myths, actually. More young people voted, or maybe it's equal, Heather, you can correct me, than voters over 65. So,
was even bigger in 08.
And so, more young people are turning out than the so-called reliable seniors. And it's also just what I was saying before and what Megan said before, it's actually a joke that we had in 04 among a lot of young people that were doing organizing. Not the argument you made to funders, but the private argument is that young people don't vote, yeah, but old people die. Like, it's just a matter of survival. You have to do that to keep your party going. And like I said before, trying to persuade someone to vote for your candidate when maybe they voted a different way before, or they're a swing voter, or maybe they're low information, they haven't made up their mind. It's actually cheaper to bring new people into the electorate. You're not persuading them. You're just targeting the people that you know are going to be on your side, and you're registering them and then GOTVing them.
Yeah, it was way less risky for Obama because he had all the money to try, but now he's proven that it works. And then ultimately turnout did not go up amongst the general electorate last year. But it went up by a couple percentage points amongst young people.
The gentleman in the hat back there, since you're over there, Jennifer.
This question's for Megan. As a young Republican and sort of a moderate one at that, I've called myself a McCain Republican, or so you can say, I've sort of become disaffected with the party and the way that it's sort of turning, and a lot of the way that my fellow young Republicans are sort of becoming more conservative than I am. What would you say to this sort of like moderate, sort of semi-liberal Republican? Do you think we should like stay the course, or how would you reach out to these sorts of people? Because this is something I really am interested in.
Yeah, I think obviously this is the cause that's closest to my heart. I will be writing a book. I'm working on a book right now about this very thing. And I think that the last election showed that the right-wing conservative Republican is not as important or relevant as it once was. I think the Bush administration has killed a lot of what originally we were talking about traditional campaigning, traditional Republican values were. I believe in the core essence of the Republican Party. When you strip away everything it's turned into. I consider myself a progressive Republican. I am not a Democrat, and I think people rush too quickly to put hats on people and, oh, if you're gay marriage, well, you're a Democrat. Get in that box. And I think for me, we just all need to stick together and find a candidate that is going to do this in the next election. I think that if we end up with someone like Mike Huckabee running, we're gonna lose. Like, that's what I think right now. And I think we have to have this progressive Republican. And I love that you say you're a McCain Republican. I love that people are comparing me to my father, because my father inspired me to be a Republican. And I think people like us, let's stick together. And also start speaking out. Right now it is not cool and sexy to be a Republican. It's not. And I think just by me speaking out, I get a lot of people, a lot of places, I'm a Republican. But don't tell anyone, because it'll ruin my street cred and no one will want to date me. And literally it's this big joke right now, that if you're a Republican, it's so taboo, it's become punk. A Republican, God, so I think speak out, stick together, and don't lose faith. I haven't lost faith, and my father lost, and my last name is McCain. I have not lost faith. Don't lose faith. That's all I have right now, but I'll have a book coming out in a year. So.
Let's go here to the gentleman right there on the aisle, and then we'll go over there.
Okay, so I guess a lot of folks talked about the issues and how big of a role this is playing in terms of involving young voters in the political process. And I think that, Mike, you, as well as Heather, sort of talked about this idea that in the most recent election, as well as in the past few years, there's been significant outreach to communities who otherwise would be disenfranchised from the political process, specifically, low-income youth and youth of color. And I think that, I guess kind of my question is, in terms of talking about, the youth vote as a youth movement, who has ownership over determining the issues that are being, advocated on? And I think in the larger scheme of things, which, like Mike, you kind of mentioned, which organizations are really seeing the benefits of this increased attention to young voters?
Sure. I don't think anyone has ownership, and I would even sort of not agree with the point that there's a youth movement the way there was like a civil rights movement. A lot of people that talk about a youth movement now are talking mostly about the fact that within the last decade, we went from having almost no focus on young people in the political process to having this hyper focus in this last election. And it's about when people use the term youth movement, I think it largely refers to the creation of all these different organizations and structures that made that possible. So I don't think anyone really owns the term. I don't think there is a movement in the classical sense of a movement. Groups that are benefiting from it, I think, probably the biggest one to me that is not specifically electorally related is Energy Action Coalition and all the work that's being done around climate. They've got tens, hundreds of thousands of people doing events all over the country. And I think that's really making an impact on that issue more than any other issue, probably. I don't know if Heather has.
Yeah. I agree with Mike. It's a role that I find myself. I moved our headquarters from LA to DC about a year ago with the intention of kind of advocating on behalf of these young people who registered and participated with Rock the Vote post-election, because we could build political power through voting and electing people, and then we had to leverage that power somehow for some change or for advocating on behalf of young people. But when you look at young people, 18 to 29-year-olds are the most diverse generation in our country's history. Diverse in terms of race, in terms of income, and an 18-year-old is very different than a 30-year-old. And so is there one answer for what represents all of that? I just don't think so. And what I've been finding myself doing is being more, trying to sit at the big kids table and say, don't isolate us or silo us as young people anymore. I don't want to sit at the kids table. When you're debating healthcare, I want to make sure that whatever the debate is, which everyone's following on the news, has a young perspective built in, and it's the young college perspective. It's the young, I'm never going to go to school, but I certainly can't afford it. Or I'm a single mother who is pregnant, and right now I can't get health care because they don't give it to people once they are pregnant. It's not even a pre-existing condition. And so looking at the 10 to 15 different things that might affect a swath, a kind of diverse set of young people, and ensure that those perspectives are being addressed. But in terms of a youth movement, I don't see it. I think we're incredibly diverse.
Over there, the gentleman waving his hand. Sure, you, sir. Sometimes it helps to be vigorous.
Indeed, thank you very much. So a name that wasn't brought up in this was Howard Dean, and I thought that was I think for some of us here, that was actually maybe the start of this campaigns using this technology, with companies such as Blue State Digital, and you've seen this rapid progression, and Obama picked them up and took it to the next level. My question for all of you is, where do you see technology going in each of your perspective fields? What do you think is the next step with technology?
Randy, do you want to? Oh, go ahead.
Republicans to start using it. Be a good place to start with my party. You know what I mean? I'd like the next Republican candidate in 2012 to use it in the same way Obama did, but better. I think Republicans are so far behind. Like I said, 500,000 Facebook friends to 5 million. That's not just a disconnect, that's a major problem. And I think I'd just like my party to start respecting the internet for the tool it is. That's all.
What about, I don't know if anybody can predict where technology is going to go, because you couldn't possibly have predicted what's happened in the last 15 or 20 years. But I don't know, Randy, do you want to, do you have any idea where the next Facebook is? I guess it's Twitter. What's the next Twitter?
Well, I think your point is an excellent one. I think that we're starting to see that politicians have to be on Facebook and they have to be on Twitter. We've actually had 3 Republican senators come through Facebook office in the last 2 weeks to talk to us about how to help set up their profiles and how to connect with people. And so I think we're really entering this era where every single person that you interact with is going to be very reachable. I think that was something that the Obama administration did very well. They made you feel like you were talking to someone directly from the campaign. It wasn't just a top-down message. You were part of the conversation. And I think technology through Twitter, through some of the new Facebook technology is really going there, and you're just going to be even more part of the conversation.
And that's probably just the same way that news media is going, just being part of that immediate conversation, that we're no longer, anchor people, voice of God, that we don't have all of the answers necessarily, but we have a lot of tools and we'll help you find them, and we'll find them with you.
If you know where technology is going, sir, start a company and you'll be
Yes.
a billionaire. So, a last question. How about the gentleman down here in the front row?
Mike, you talked about that it doesn't just have to be at the presidential level, but at lower levels. What do you see that's working in terms of reaching out to young people? Things like the Bus Project in Oregon, but elsewhere as well, candidates, state representatives, whatever.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the Bus Project is a great example.
Explain the Bus Project.
So the Bus Project is, well, the Bus Federation is an umbrella group of 5 different organizations. Each works in a single state in New Mexico, Colorado, Montana, Oregon, and Washington. The Oregon Bus Project is the group that started it. And what they do is they try and make politics fun for everyone, mostly for young people, but for anyone. So they have a weekly pub night where they all get together and talk about politics. They have this giant bus where they go all over the state canvassing different neighborhoods and doing real field work. They're very focused on results and being very serious, but it's always very fun, and they always try and integrate all the political work as deeply as they can into the social lives of their members. So when Howard Dean left the DNC, Cornell Belcher, the pollster, wrote a memo saying that, here's all that you accomplished. The 50-state strategy was amazing. What we have to do in the next couple of years is continue the 50-state strategy. It has to be more focused on people of color and more focused on young people. And young people, he noted that down ballot, overall, there was generally a 20% drop-off in terms of how young people participated. So, X many people voted for president, 20% less voted for Senate, Congress, governor, or mayor, anything else. And the Bus Project ran a campaign to educate people about why it's important to vote down ballot. They went street corner to street corner, knocking on doors, college campuses, and this is what I'm saying. It's not just technology, it's that face-to-face field campaign. They took all their resources and they knocked on thousands of doors, and they saw significantly less down ballot drop-off among young people. So, I mean, I think for independent groups, it's that. For candidates, it's, not listening to the consultant that says young people don't vote, drop them off your walk list. Drop anyone off under the age of 30 off your walk list. Some people from the Obama campaign were telling me that in Iowa, one of the ways that they got so many young people to participate in the caucuses is that they bought consumer information that colleges typically buy to find out who they need to send in high school, who they need to send their brochures to advertise their college. They found young people that way that they wouldn't have found through the traditional voter file. They got on Facebook and built voter files that way. And it's really that. It's using technology to fill in the gaps for the voter file, and then just doing the regular political work.
And one other thing I'd add to that is that the Obama campaign really saw, traditionally you give your money or you give your time to a campaign, and they saw that there was, a dozen things in between there that could be done online. So maybe you can't donate time, but you can donate your Facebook status, and that communicates to 1,000 people, or maybe you donate frequent flyer miles to send someone to a swing state in your place. So, and they saw all these really exciting things that could be done with technology that were outside the box.
Well, I hope regardless of which party or which campaign, other people do that, and all of you turn out, keep turning out, keep voting. Thank you all for coming tonight. It's great to see so many students here. And my thanks to the panel. Thank you. Good night.